What makes a dogfight scene feel real to a pilot who has lived through the chaos of air combat? The answer lies not in explosions, but in emotion. These films stripped away the glamour and showed what it truly meant to fight miles above the earth where bravery and fear shared the same cockpit. These are the stories that pilots say finally got it right. Number 15. Battle of Britain, 1969. It was not just a film, it was a tribute forged in exhaust smoke and skyfire. Battle of Britain recreated the desperate air duels that saved Europe from invasion. Producers hunted down real Spitfires, Hurricanes, and Messerschmitts from museums and collectors, assembling the largest private air force since the war itself. Every maneuver, every dive and turn was performed by real pilots flying real aircraft. The film captured the chaos of 1940 like few others. Director Guy Hamilton rejected miniatures and trick shots, choosing to film the aerial sequences in real sunlight over the English Channel. The result was breathtaking, yet behind the camera the production nearly collapsed. Delays in Spain grounded filming and several rare planes were damaged mid-flight. Critics were split. Some praised its technical brilliance, others found it too cold. But to real airmen it was sacred ground. They saw in it not actors, but echoes of friends who never came home. Decades later, it remains the benchmark for authenticity. Battle of Britain did not just show war, it resurrected it with terrifying honesty. Number 14. 12 O'Clock High, 1949. Before the roar of jet engines, before dogfights became spectacle, there was 12 O'Clock High, a film about fear, courage, and the invisible wounds of leadership. Gregory Peck played a commander hardened by loss, forcing exhausted airmen to keep flying daylight bombing missions deep into enemy territory. The film was drawn from the real experiences of the 8th Air Force. Its accuracy stunned veterans. Everything from cockpit briefings to the tense silence before takeoff felt true. Real combat footage was woven into the dogfights, giving it a documentary intensity that audiences were not prepared for. Some theaters even warned viewers of its realism. Military advisors debated whether it revealed too much about bomber tactics. Yet despite controversy, it became required viewing for Air Force cadets. It taught that command was not glory, but guilt carried silently. Decades later, pilots still quote its lessons. 12 O'Clock High was not about war in the sky, it was about war within. Number 13. The Blue Max, 1966. The Blue Max was not about heroes, it was about hunger. Set during the dying days of the First World War, it followed Bruno Stachel, a German pilot obsessed with earning the Empire's highest honor. He would risk anything and anyone to get it. Director John Guillermin filmed with genuine vintage biplanes restored and flown in deadly formation. The aerial footage was not staged, it was survived. During one flight, a stunt pilot narrowly avoided a fatal mid-air collision. The danger was real, the beauty undeniable. Critics called it a masterpiece of aerial realism. Veterans praised its flight accuracy while condemning its brutal honesty about ego and ambition. The sound of engines replaced music, the wind replaced dialogue. Over time, it became a cult treasure among pilots who saw their own struggle in Stachels. The Blue Max was about the seductive madness of glory. It showed that the higher you fly, the thinner the air becomes until there is no breath left at all. Number 12. The Dam Busters, 1955. Few films balance engineering genius with airborne terror the way The Dam Busters did. Based on the true story of Britain's daring Operation Chastise, it chronicled the Royal Air Force's attempt to destroy German dams using revolutionary bouncing bombs. Directed by Michael Anderson, it became one of the most revered British war films ever made, yet also one of the most misunderstood. The film followed Wing Commander Guy Gibson and his squadron as they trained to perfection for a mission that seemed impossible. The attention to realism was extraordinary. Real Lancaster bombers thundered across the skies of Lincolnshire, captured in crisp monochrome photography that gave the dogfights a chilling intimacy. The dialogue was stripped of heroics, leaving only the mechanical rhythm of discipline and death. Behind the scenes, the production faced military censorship. Certain bomb designs were still classified even a decade after the war, and the Air Ministry demanded script changes. The studio feared audiences might find the losses too heavy. Yet the film triumphed both technically and emotionally. Its theme music became an anthem, and its stoic tone defined British war cinema for years. Veteran pilots called it the most accurate depiction of bomber crew life ever captured. The film revealed not just flight, but faith, the kind needed to fly into darkness, knowing there was little chance of return. The Dam Busters was not about victory, it was about the men who made it possible. Number 11. Memphis Belle, 1990. When Memphis Belle soared into theaters, it brought a generation's war back to life with heart-wrenching realism. The film dramatized the final mission of an American B-17 crew on their 25th and final bombing run over Nazi Germany. Unlike many war epics, this was not about generals or strategies, but 10 young men trapped in a steel sky coffin. Director Michael Caton Jones insisted on authenticity. He used real B-17s restored and flown for the production. Every takeoff and landing was filmed with crews sweating inside tight, unventilated cockpits. To heighten realism, the camera crew endured the same cramped quarters and turbulence. The result was claustrophobic and unforgettable. The U.S. Air Force supported the film, but tensions brewed behind the scenes. Veterans demanded accuracy while producers wanted Hollywood drama. This clash led to heated debates over dialogue and historical liberties. Despite that struggle, the finished product earned praise from former airmen who said it came closest to capturing the noise fear and teamwork of real bombing runs. The film's legacy endures in flight museums and memorial screenings. Many young pilots cite Memphis Belle as the movie that inspired them to fly. It made clear that heroism was not about medals, but about surviving one more hour in a sky filled with fire. Number 10. Tora, 1970. Tora was unlike any war film before it or since. A U.S.-Japanese co-production, it retold the events of the Pearl Harbor attack from both perspectives with unflinching objectivity. Instead of melodrama, it offered precision. Every maneuver, every order, every explosion was reconstructed using military records and Japanese naval logs. The production was immense. Director Richard Fleischer oversaw American sequences, while Toshio Masuda and Kenji Fukasaku handled the Japanese scenes. Real aircraft were used whenever possible, including authentic Zero fighters and P-40 replicas. Massive full-scale ships were built and detonated for the attack scenes captured with multiple cameras from real aerial angles. Yet the film nearly collapsed under political tension. American studios feared depicting the Japanese side too sympathetically, while Japanese investors demanded historical fairness. The budget exploded, delays mounted, and some critics predicted disaster. But when it premiered, audiences were stunned. Pilots admired its unmatched accuracy in showing the tactics of carrier-based warfare and the chaos of surprise assault. Though it failed commercially, it later gained cult status as a teaching tool for military academies. Tora remains a cinematic manual on the anatomy of an air raid. It showed that war has no villains, only perspectives carried by wings of fire. Number 9. The Bridges at Toko-Ri, 1954. The Bridges at Toko-Ri was not just another war film. It was a meditation on sacrifice filmed with stunning realism that made pilots both proud and haunted. Based on James Michener's novel, it followed U.S. Navy aviators during the Korean War as they launched from icy carriers into the heart of anti-aircraft fire. Director Mark Robson worked closely with the U.S. Navy to ensure the flight scenes were perfect. Real Grumman Panthers roared off real carriers, and the footage captured the violent catapult launches that few civilians had ever seen. The roar, the vibration, and the vertical dives were filmed exactly as pilots described them. No tricks, no models, just courage. Behind the scenes, however, disaster loomed. A Navy plane crashed during filming, killing the pilot and reminding everyone that war's danger could not be imitated without consequence. The production paused for days while crews debated whether to continue. They did, and the result was a visual masterpiece that treated combat not as glory but as tragedy. When it premiered, audiences wept not for victory but for inevitability. Critics praised its authenticity and emotional restraint, while veterans called it the most honest portrayal of jet-age combat ever filmed. The bridges at Toko-Ri asked one eternal question that still echoes through every cockpit. Where do we get such men? Number 8. The Hunters. 1958. The Hunters soared above standard war adventure. It was a cold-blooded portrait of fighter pilots locked in a duel against both enemy MiGs and their own pride. Set during the Korean War, it starred Robert Mitchum as an aging ace facing obsolescence in a new age of jet warfare. Director Dick Powell filmed with cooperation from the U.S. Air Force using real F-86 Sabres and MiG-15 stand-ins. The dogfights were choreographed by real combat veterans and shot in flight with revolutionary camera rigs that gave audiences the feeling of sitting inside the cockpit. The result was breathtaking. Jets screamed through mountain clouds in sequences so fast that editors had to slow the footage to be comprehensible. Production was grueling. The heat on airfields in Arizona melted equipment and mechanics worked around the clock to keep the planes flying. One close pass between jets came within inches of a mid-air collision, prompting the Air Force to tighten safety oversight. When the film premiered, many dismissed it as a routine action story, but over time it gained respect among pilots who saw its deeper truth. The Hunters captured the loneliness of speed and the despair of men defined only by flight. It remains a cult classic in aviation, circles a reminder that heroism often hides behind exhaustion and regret. Number 7. Angels. 1-5, 1952. Angels 1-5 was among the first post-war films to strip away propaganda and show the reality of the Royal Air Force's Battle of Britain experience. Released when memories were still raw, it used authentic RAF bases equipment and even real Spitfires to tell the story of young pilots struggling against overwhelming odds. Director George Moore O'Farrell avoided Hollywood dramatics. Instead, he focused on atmosphere. The tired mechanics, the sleepless commanders, and the rookies terrified before their first mission. The dialogue was simple, the visuals raw. It was not a film about victory, but about endurance. The production was supported by the RAF but also monitored. Certain technical details of radar operations and command systems were still classified. As a result, the filmmakers had to invent fictional call signs and coded references. Despite these limitations, the accuracy of flight operations and radio chatter amazed veterans. Audiences at the time found it too grim compared to other patriotic war dramas. Yet pilots adored it. They said it captured the exhaustion of endless readiness, the hum of engines that never seemed to stop, and the quiet. Fear that tomorrow's dawn might be their last. Angels 1-5 endures as a quiet masterpiece. It proved that realism was not about explosions, but about truth, and that truth could be beautiful even when painted in smoke and sorrow. Number 6. The Right Stuff. 1983. The Right Stuff was not a traditional WWII dogfight movie, but pilots revere it for capturing the soul of flight itself. Directed by Philip Kaufman, it chronicled America's first test pilots and the birth of the space program, yet its DNA came straight from the air combat veterans of WWII who shaped post-war aviation. The film's opening sequence alone, a sound barrier-shattering flight by Chuck Yeager, reminded viewers of what flying meant to those who first took death into their hands. Real aircraft were used wherever possible, including the Bell X-1 and several WWII-era planes flown by stunt pilots who trained relentlessly to recreate the daredevil precision of Yeager's early missions. Production was grueling. Filming at high altitudes pushed the camera crews to the edge of collapse, and one stunt nearly ended in disaster when an aircraft caught fire mid-descent. Kaufman refused to fake anything. He wanted the audience to feel the strain in every breath. When released, The Right Stuff baffled studios. It was too long, too serious, too authentic, yet veterans instantly recognized the truth in it. The tension, the noise, the terror of losing control. It was what every pilot remembered. The film's legacy soared beyond awards. It reignited respect for those who risked everything to push through fear and reach the edge of heaven. The Right Stuff was more than aviation history. It was a love letter to those who lived by instinct and trusted the sky to forgive them. Number 5. Aces High, 1976. Aces High is often overlooked, but to fighter pilots, it is a haunting masterpiece. Based on R.C. Sheriff's play Journey's End, it transplanted the setting from the trenches of WWI to the skies above France. The result was devastating. There was no glory, only youth and death. Director Jack Gold filmed using real vintage aircraft and period-accurate uniforms. The aerial cinematography was intimate, showing pilots trapped inside their biplanes, their goggles fogged with fear and sweat. The scenes of dogfighting were not heroic. They were chaotic and disorienting, just as veterans described. During production, one aircraft's engine failed mid-flight, forcing an emergency landing that destroyed the plane. Instead of hiding it, Gold incorporated the wreckage into the film, symbolizing the waste and futility of endless missions. Critics dismissed it at first as too bleak, but pilots who saw it said it was the most truthful film about WWI aviation ever made. Aces High revealed that the real battle was not against the enemy, but against despair. Young men climbed into their planes every dawn, knowing that few would see another sunrise. It stripped the myth of the noble airman and showed the boy beneath the wings. For that brutal honesty, it remains deeply respected among aviators who know courage is quiet, not loud. Number 4. Dark Blue World, 2001. Dark Blue World arrived decades after the war, yet felt like a time capsule buried in emotion. A Czech-British production, it told the forgotten story of Czechoslovak pilots who fled Nazi occupation to fight alongside the RAF in the Battle of Britain. Their bravery, their exile, and their betrayal after the war were captured with painful authenticity. Director Jan Sverák used a blend of real aircraft and seamlessly integrated archival footage from Battle of Britain. The dogfights were raw and beautifully filmed in natural light over fields that once hosted real air bases. The actors trained in cockpit procedures and flight discipline under the guidance of surviving Czech veterans. Production was turbulent. The film faced financial shortages and political hesitation in post-communist Europe, where these pilots had once been branded traitors. Yet against all odds, it was completed and released to international acclaim. Veterans wept during screenings. They said it was the first film that understood what it meant to love a homeland that no longer existed. Pilots admired its technical precision, especially in how it captured the vulnerability of combat flying. Aircraft trembling under stress, the cold oxygen masks the endless fatigue. Dark Blue World was not just a war film. It was an elegy for those erased from history. It reminded the world that heroism often survives in silence and memory rather than medals. Number 3. The Great Waldo Pepper, 1975. The Great Waldo Pepper was not set in wartime skies, yet fighter pilots revere it as one of the most authentic depictions of what it feels like to fly on the razor's edge. Directed by George Roy Hill and starring Robert Redford, it explored the post-WWI years when battle-hardened pilots became barnstormers and stunt flyers chasing the thrill they could not forget. The film's aerial sequences were breathtakingly real. Hill refused to use models or trick photography. Every loop roll and spiral dive was performed by real pilots in open cockpit biplanes over the wide Kansas plains. Several stuntmen risked their lives for the camera, one narrowly surviving after a wing collapsed mid-stunt. Redford himself insisted on flying in several shots to capture the true terror of wind and altitude. Behind the scenes, it was a logistical nightmare. Aircraft had to be restored from scrap condition. Mechanics worked around the clock to keep the fragile wood and fabric machines airworthy. The sound department recorded actual engines from the era instead of using synthetic effects, giving the film its unforgettable growl of freedom. Though not a traditional combat movie, pilots praised its spirit. It portrayed the addiction to flight, the way men who once lived by the machine gun could not live without the machine itself. Critics admired its melancholy tone, its understanding that adventure fades, but memory endures. The Great Waldo Pepper was about loss masquerading as flight. It showed that even when the war ends, some pilots never land. Number 2. Flyboys, 2006. Flyboys brought World War I aviation to modern audiences with the help of digital effects, but what earned it respect from pilots was its commitment to authenticity in behavior discipline and strategy. Directed by Tony Bill himself, a licensed pilot, the film followed the Lafayette Escadrille, American volunteers who fought for France before the U.S. entered the war. Every flight scene was mapped from real combat reports. The choreography of dogfights mirrored known encounters from 1917 and 1918. The film's Newport and Fokker aircraft were built as full-scale replicas capable of flight. Pilots flew these machines for background realism, while digital doubles handled the more dangerous spins and collisions. Production was punishing. Strong winds in England delayed shooting, and several prop planes were damaged beyond repair. The aerial cinematography used real horizon light instead of studio filters, giving every frame the feel of dawn over Europe. Many critics dismissed it as flashy yet combat veterans, and historians praised its accuracy in altitude changes, turning radii, and even fuel limitations. The pilots in the film communicated with hand signals, not radios, exactly as they would have in real life. Flyboys was not about politics or victory. It was about idealism. Young men who joined for glory and found themselves buried under clouds of smoke and fire. For modern airmen, it remains a visual hymn to courage before technology turned war into distance. It reminded audiences that in the earliest days of flight, bravery meant nothing without instinct and sky sense. Number 1. Top Gun: Maverick, 2022. Top Gun: Maverick stunned modern pilots because it was real when it did not have to be. Tom Cruise and director Joseph Kosinski could have relied entirely on CGI, yet chose to film inside real fighter jets at crushing G-forces that tested every actor's endurance. The result was not a sequel. It was an aviation revolution. The story followed Captain Pete Mitchell returning to train a new generation of aviators, but beneath the nostalgia lay a love letter to the experience of flight. Cruise worked with the U.S. Navy for over a year, designing custom IMAX camera pods that could survive Mach speeds and violent turns. Every maneuver, every inversion was shot for real. The actors underwent months of survival and flight training. Several vomited mid-flight but refused to quit. The Navy monitored the script to maintain realism, but the filmmakers still pushed limits. They filmed carrier launches at dawn, capturing vapor trails and sunlight bouncing off the Pacific in ways even military photographers called art. When the film premiered, real pilots flooded social media with praise. They said it captured the physical exhaustion, the sensory overload, and the sacred trust between pilot and machine better than any film in decades. Top Gun: Maverick was not just a blockbuster. It was a reminder that the sky still humbles those who challenge it. It showed that courage and discipline remain timeless, whether in a Spitfire over London or a Super Hornet over the desert. For the pilots who know the silence before a dive, it was truth on film. These films did more than entertain. They carried the memories of men who once stared into the sun and never blinked. Each frame a fragment of courage, each dogfight a confession of fear. Which one do you think captured the true heart of flying? Let us know below, and do not forget to like and subscribe for more untold war stories.